What's up, everybody, and welcome back to Fireside Giants. I'm your host, Anthony Rivardo, joined by my co-host, Alex Wilson. And guys, cut day tomorrow. The New York Giants and all the other teams in the NFL need to finalize their 53-man roster tomorrow. So what's going to happen? Well, a lot of players are going to be placed on the waiver wire. That's going to give the Giants an opportunity to potentially acquire some new talent to fortify some of their weaker positions, but it's also going to leave the Giants with a bit of a conundrum. What do they do at the quarterback position? Now, we've got our starter. That's Russell Wilson. Can't wait to see him carve up that Commanders defense in week one. And then behind him, Jackson Dart. Can't wait to see him carve up some defenses for years to come. And then behind him, you've got Jameis Winston, who's a very quality backup under contract for 2 seasons. And then finally, QB4 on this roster right now is none other than my guy, Tommy DeVito. You guys know I'm a big Tommy DeVito fan. I think Tommy DeVito is a much better quarterback than people give him credit for. I think he's a very capable backup, but I do think a lot of teams around the league agree with that sentiment. And for that reason, the Giants might not want to cut Tommy DeVito outright. They might look to trade him and see if there's a team in need of a backup quarterback that would send a late round draft pick for Tommy DeVito. So that's really what we're going to discuss in this episode, whether or not we think Tommy DeVito can or should or will be traded. And then, of course, go ahead and dive into some of the upgrades that the Giants could potentially make on the waiver wire as cut day looms tomorrow afternoon. So, Alex, how are you doing today, my friend? How are you feeling after a good weekend? We got to rest on that Thursday night smackdown of the Patriots that Tommy DeVito delivered. But now DeVito, his stock is soaring maybe higher than ever after a really strong preseason. What do you think the odds are of the New York Giants finding a trade partner for Tommy Cutlets?
Yeah, I mean, listen, we talked about this before the podcast even started, and Tommy DeVito has an interesting situation on his end. The Giants have, for the first time, an embarrassment of riches at the quarterback position. You could say Jackson Dart's ready to be the guy now. A lot of analysts believe that to be the case. I don't necessarily think they have to rush him. I think a lot of fans agree with that sentiment. Give him a couple weeks, learn the game, learn the game day like preparation and tendencies, and then he'll be ready when his number is called. I have no doubt about it. But you have a variety of different options here for the Giants. Are they going to carry 4 quarterbacks? Not many teams do. The Browns will, because they don't really have one that's settled. So I'm sure that'll be like rotating if Joe Flacco doesn't really lock it down. But I'm sure he's the best quarterback on that team by far. They are kind of holding on to a bunch. The Giants could go in that direction, but I think they need that slot elsewhere. They really do have some depth concerns at safety, linebacker. Like they might want to roster somebody else at one of those positions because they just have so much talent at quarterback. You have the Russell Wilson, who's under contract for 1 year. You have the Jackson Dart, who's under contract for 5 years. Given they pick up his 5th-year option, they'll probably extend it before then if he actually pans out. And then you have Jameis Winston, who's here on a 2-year deal. Winston offers a lot of value because he can be that true and tried backup, knows the offense, really, really good chemistry and relationship already building with Jackson Dart. And then Winston could end up, Wilson could end up becoming the trade piece if Dart takes over for him. We'll see how things progress here. But, then there's the DeVito situation where, he's entering year 3. He is on a 4-year deal, obviously a rookie contract. Actually, not even. He's a UDFA, so I think he's just kind of constantly being re-signed as a free agent, and a very cheap one at that. The Giants have the rights over him. But, you look at the value he brings. I'll turn to like what Wan'Dale Robinson said yesterday. The tape shows that he can play in this league. And DeVito has proven that he can play in the NFL. He's dominating backups. This preseason has like 350 yards. He has 4 touchdowns. He has a 78% completion rate. Everything that he's put on the field so far suggests that he is much better than second or at least third string players. Like he's a second string kind of guy. He can have some spot starts for you. There are teams out there that I think could benefit from a player like him because he's so cheap and the Giants have just so much value. If the Giants don't want to carry 4 quarterbacks, trading DeVito actually makes more sense than trading anybody else at this point in time, even though I know a lot of people like him and want to keep him around. The question is, what team would they look to trade him to? Right now, I think the Las Vegas Raiders make a lot of sense. They just lost Aiden O'Connell for like 2 months, and they need someone to kind of step in and be that backup to Geno Smith. Tommy DeVito can step in. He can operate an offense. He can do it at a reasonable level, a competent level, and it's just good insurance policy. Then they can carry 3 quarterbacks when O'Connell returns, and DeVito can be that QB3. I think that makes a lot of sense, but the question is, like, what value can you actually get in return for DeVito? What kind of draft compensation? I think that's worthwhile exploring.
That's definitely worth exploring, but I think that it's important to remind people, even if you're getting let's call it a 7th-round pick. That's better than nothing. If you cut DeVito, you're literally getting nothing in return, so you might as well explore the opportunity to trade him, unless you're confident that he's going to clear waivers and wind up back on your practice squad. If that were the case, then sure, that's the route to take, but I'm not confident that that's going to be the case. I think, like you said, the Las Vegas Raiders are a team that stands out as they're going to need a backup quarterback. I mean, Pete Carroll came out and said, we are looking for a guy with starting experience, somebody who has played on NFL Sundays. We need an experienced backup in this room behind Geno Smith now that Aiden O'Connell has gone down. And Alex, the Raiders are not the only team that makes sense for Tommy DeVito. I'll actually say, look across the stadium, look across the field to the other part of the stadium. The New York Jets, Tyrod Taylor. I mean, we all know him from his time with the New York Giants. Great backup quarterback, never healthy. And right now, he's injured. Go figure. So the Jets are also in the market for a backup quarterback. The guys that they had in the preseason didn't look all that stellar. I mean, to be fair, their starting quarterback didn't look all that stellar either. Justin Fields with a rough preseason, but they definitely need a backup quarterback. And for Tommy DeVito, staying in his hometown area of New Jersey, just going to the other side of the stadium might make sense for him, might also make a lot of sense for the Jets. However, you also have to keep in mind the waiver wire priorities here. The Jets would be behind the Raiders. So if the Jets wanted Tommy DeVito as their backup quarterback, they would need to trade for him in order to ensure that he doesn't get claimed by the Raiders on the waiver wire. So I think there is a legitimate market that's building for Tommy DeVito via trade. I think there's going to be several teams that need a backup. They look at his career numbers, and Alex, they're not half bad. I mean, we're talking about a guy who's appeared in 12 games. He's made 8 starts. He has an 8-3 touchdown to interception ratio. Is he a world beater? Is he going to throw for 300 yards a game? No. Do you need him to? Not at all. He's a quality backup. And that's the argument that I've always made for Tommy DeVito. He's more than good enough to hang in this league. He wasn't just, a fun story. He was a good football player. He went out there and he won some impressive games for the Giants. People forget that he was really good in that game against the Packers on prime time. The Giants surprisingly won that one. DeVito played a huge role in that win. He hit some strikes downfield to Wan'Dale Robinson and other players. He can play, and he's not afraid to throw the ball downfield. He's aggressive. Sure, he holds on to the ball a little too long. He definitely has flaws in his game. He's not a regular everyday starter, but he is a very high-quality backup, and he's a great locker room guy and teammate as well. Has very close relationships with a lot of these guys on the Giants roster, and I think he would fit in many different locker rooms. So I hope that the Giants find a way to get some sort of value out of Tommy DeVito. I really don't think he lasts on the waiver wire. I know that there are statistics that indicate most players do make it past waivers. Alex, I think the number was 2.86% of players who got cut last year.
Yeah.
So the expectation is most of these guys will not get claimed, but Tommy DeVito feels like the rare exception to that rule.
I would agree, especially because finding good backups at a really cheap price is a really hard to find. Backup quarterbacks are getting paid these days, man. Jameis Winston's getting $8 million a year to be a backup. So, and that could, $4 million with the incentives would get to $8 million. If he was to play, but still $4 million for a backup quarterback is, people are paying for him. And I think that the Giants can give a team a quarterback that's literally making like $1 million a season and can, spot start if need be and be competent. I think that's extremely valuable. I do think a team like the Rams, a team like the Raiders, like the Jets, like there are a couple clubs out there that could use a player like that, maybe just someone fast paced, has some athleticism, can make the throws, has some zip on his passes, maybe a little bit more, developmental upside. And he's still very young. So I do think that, that the Giants do have resource. They have assets for the first time, Anthony, in quite some time. The Giants have more talent than they really know what to do with at some positions, right? Like that's a really rare thing for us that we actually can sit here and say, that guy's going to get claimed if we don't, keep him on the roster. There are a couple players like that. So right now, I do think the Giants have to make some really difficult decisions. We already saw the process start. Up to this point, the guys that have been cut, Jordan Bly, KJ Cloyd, O'Donnell Fortune, Deontay Johnson, Jimmy Morrissey, Zach Pascal, Montrell Washington, Jason Williams, and Kayvon Wallace have all been cut up to this point. And then tomorrow we're going to have like 40 guys get cut. So it's going to be quite the bloodbath. And, I feel for those players that have worked their tail off to be on the roster. It's a really, really sad day in the NFL for a lot of these guys because, the journey continues. But, the Giants have to make these decisions, and some of them are going to be tough. I also wouldn't be surprised, Anthony, definitely reasonable discussion. What are your thoughts about receiver in terms of the Giants maybe rekindling with Gabe Davis? I know that right now having a whole bunch of UDFAs, it's a risky approach. Having a whole bunch of guys that may not have like that much experience. Maybe they want to bring in someone with a little bit more experience, especially with Brian Dable and Joe Shane and back in Buffalo. Maybe Gabe Davis, if he is healthy enough, would be a reasonable, cheap acquisition they can add to the unit.
I think he would be an interesting addition, especially when you consider the fact that the Giants would not have to compete with the waiver wire to sign him. He's already a free agent veteran, so it's really just about, does he want to play here? Do the Giants want him? And then they get a deal done. It's a little bit different, when you're looking at the waiver wire. You don't always know if you're going to get the guy that you want because some of the teams ahead of you can make a claim. Now, the Giants are only third, I think, on the waiver wire priority. I think it's based on the draft order. So they should be able to get the majority of the guys that they want, but some of the teams in front of them might put the claim in for the same guy, and then they have to worry about that. But Gabe Davis, he's a familiar player to Brian Dable and this offensive staff. He is a veteran with experience, big game experience as well, has made some huge plays and had some great performances in the playoffs. Just one of those guys that I think would be a great addition, not only to the lineup, but to the locker room. When you look at this receiving core for the New York Giants, it's a lot of unproven talents. They already cut Montrell Washington. Bo Collins is vying for a roster spot. And some of these other guys who may or may not make it, like Lil Jordan Humphrey, don't have the same level of pedigree that Gabe Davis has. In many ways, he would be an objective upgrade in this wide receiver room as that WR4. And yes, I'd call him WR4 because without a doubt in my mind, he would rank ahead of Jalen Hyatt on this depth chart today. Jalen Hyatt is somebody who I think is actually on the bubble now after a really poor preseason and a really poor summer in general. So Gabe Davis, I think the need for him on this roster is greater than it's ever been. The Giants explored it many weeks ago. They re-explored it. But now I think that it's more relevant than ever to bring in some wide receiver help. And Gabe Davis truly does make a lot of sense as a deep threat guy, physical, big body wide receiver, again, with big game experience and familiarity with Brian Dable. So I would totally go in on Gabe Davis, Alex. I think that would be a smart signing for the Giants.
Yeah, I mean, just at the very least, he's a veteran, has experience, and listen, maybe he carves out a role, maybe he doesn't. It's no harm, no foul. Most of these UDFA guys will probably land on the practice squad anyway. So if Gabe Davis doesn't pan out, you just cut him and you promote whoever you want. It could be a little Jordan Humphrey. It could be a Bo Collins, which I think he will make the roster, or any of them. So, definitely pretty excited to see how these decisions unfold. The Giants have lots of talent, but let's talk about two positions that don't really have that much talent right now behind the regular stars. Let's talk about linebacker first up and foremost. You have Bobby Okereke, who, I think he'll bounce back after a little bit of a spotty last season. There were reports that there was some feud between him and Shane Bowen, but they kind of like buried that now. So things are looking good. And I think that that's really optimistic for the leader of that defense in terms of he's the mic. Like, he has to communicate properly. I think that he was having a hard time communicating because Shane Bowen was just a little bit all over the place. They really didn't have enough talent either. And he played every game through injury, through everything, trials, tribulations. Bobby Okereke was out there. And I think that people underrate that fact that he was available despite the fact Dexter Lawrence was out, Banks sucked, Drew Phillips was out for a large portion of this. Like, they were just messed up. And I think that he at least was available. I think that is beneficial.
No, I do need to correct you. He only played in 12 games last year. He did have a season-ending.
But I'm saying, right? But what I'm saying before that, he played through cracked ribs and a broken pinky.
Sure. So okay, yeah. Well, he did do that, but then he landed on injured reserve.
Of course, but like you can't. Of course, like season-ending injury is what it is. But the guy was playing through like multiple issues when like most players would have probably just sat out. He played through it despite the fact that the Giants were so bad.
Well, I agree with that. I think that's an important point to kind of repeat because there were a couple of guys on this Giants defense who played through injuries. Bobby Okereke, Brian Burns. He actually did appear in all 17 games, despite being on the injury report probably 12 of those games. So you had a couple of guys who were balling out week in, week out, and playing through injuries. And those guys have emerged as the leaders of this defense and really of this locker room. So Bobby Okereke, I'm really hoping for a bounce back season from him. I think he's a great player. And now that him and Shane Bowen have seemingly buried the hatchet here, I think we will get a more effective communication in that Giants defense out of the middle linebacker. But I also think, like you said, Alex, there wasn't a lot of talent on that defense last year. And I think that caused some wires to get crossed between Okereke and Shane Bowen. And I think when you really look at that linebacker core, things were pretty thin, and they still kind of are. Everybody knows I'm a huge Micah McFadden fan. I think the Giants should go ahead and extend him tomorrow. I think they should have done it yesterday, right? Go ahead and extend the former 5th-round pick. He's a great starting linebacker to play in tandem with Bobby Okereke. But behind those two guys, I can't tell you, Alex, that I'm very confident in this group. I mean, you've got players like Demetrius Flanagan Fowles, I don't think I want to see him on Sundays. Chris Board, I think he had some okay moments during the preseason, but again, not a guy that I'm necessarily eager to see play on Sundays. And then you've got Darius Masua, who the Giants drafted in the 6th round of last year's draft. He's flashed some things here or there, but even still, not a guy that you really want to get on the field more than you need to. Could the Giants go on this waiver wire and find some linebacker talent? I think they probably can, and I think it's an area that they will address on the waiver wire, or at least attempt to. And I also think, Alex, safety is another spot that the Giants are going to look for depth. They had a couple injuries at that position this summer, and I don't think that behind Tyler Nubin and Dane Belton and Javon Holland, they love what they've got. So I think that's one of the areas that they could get active and acquire some additional talent. And I'll throw a name out there for you, Alex. It's a guy who actually had an interception against the New York Giants in their final preseason game. That is Kyle Duggar of the New England Patriots. This is a player who at one point was looked at as one of the rising stars at the position in the NFL. He signed a 4-year, $58 million contract with the Patriots a couple off seasons ago, but now he's barely even out there. He's playing with the 4th string. This new coaching staff has stepped in, taken over the Patriots and said, we don't like Kyle Duggar. We don't want him on this team. And now they're actively shopping him on the trade market. However, he does hold a pretty high salary. And this almost feels like a situation, Alex, where they might try and dump his contract and even sacrifice a draft pick to do so. So I'm wondering if that's something that we could see shake out here for Kyle Duggar. I don't know if the New York Giants could theoretically afford to acquire him, but let's imagine that it's a low asking price in terms of trade value and the financials happen to work out. Is that a player that you're interested in? Or at this point, do you feel like Kyle Duggar is kind of past his prime, so to speak?
I mean, listen, we're talking about backup positions here. So like, we're not asking him to start. We're just asking to have competency like behind the regular starters. And Duggar played 759 snaps last season. He's played 4,000 snaps almost in the last 5 years. And he's still 29 years old. So listen, is he a great player? No. Is he a good player? Probably not. Is he average? He's about, you could say, average, and obviously his performance has dwindled over the last couple seasons, you could say, in quite a significant way. He gave up 6 touchdowns last season with 0 picks and 0 pass breakups. But like, when you're talking about backups, you're really just looking for somebody that can step up and give you at least a semblance of competency. Like, that's really what you're looking for. Dane Belton, he's just competent. So he's not like a great player. He's competent in some regard. Mostly, you know, as I guess even say he missed a lot of tackles, but he has his moments. He's actually a decent ball hawk. He's a guy that gets into the right place at the right time. But I think, you know, just having some more depth that has experience, you know, was once a good player. It kind of gives me like Jalen Mills vibes of like what the Giants had in him, but a younger version of that. So I definitely think I wouldn't be opposed to taking a shot there, like just giving him. It depends on like what you're trading for him, though. Like, what do you, in your opinion, like what do you think the Giants would have to give up just to get a player like Duggar?
I think it's tough to say because, again, 2 seasons ago, 2022 offseason, he was looked at as one of the best young safeties in the NFL. But now he's 29 years old. He's not one of the young safeties in the NFL. And he's signed to this contract that paid him like he is one of the best young safeties in the NFL. So that contract has really not aged well. And unfortunately for the Patriots, I don't think they're going to get anything in return for Kyle Duggar. I think, Alex, truthfully, to get rid of the salary, they're going to have to sacrifice a draft pick. So I actually think the Giants could get a player and a pick for Kyle Duggar. I think they could do a pick swap here and they could go ahead and get Duggar in addition to that. I really don't think it would cost them a whole lot.
Yeah, I think if you're going to give like a late round draft pick, that's totally fine for a player like that. However, I would wait until after waivers to see maybe you do get someone with a little bit more upside, maybe someone a bit younger, and maybe a guy that just had a good preseason, but they just had a deeper position group. Who knows? I think the Giants are pretty high up on the waiver wire list, if I'm not mistaken, because they were horrible last year. I think it does go by, rankings in that way. So, you know, if they do have a pretty solid waiver claim order spot, then I think that they'll probably just find a piece that maybe a team cut with a deeper safety position group. That could be something to consider as well.
They're 3rd on the waiver wire, but I also think for Kyle Duggar, just to wrap it up on that point, there is an out in his contract. If the Patriots are not able to find a trade partner for him, they likely will cut him to save $6 million. So there is a chance that the Giants are able to acquire him as a free agent anyway. They can go ahead and release him. It'll be $9 million in dead cap for them, but they'll save a little bit of money, the Patriots would. But they'd rather trade him because they would save more via trade. But again, the Giants would have to take on too much of a contract. Like I said, I don't think the Giants would have to give up a draft pick to take Kyle Duggar. I think that they would inherit a draft pick just to absorb Kyle Duggar's contract. But I don't think they have enough cap space to do that, essentially. But definitely a name to keep an eye on. And I agree with you. I think they will look for somebody younger. Just to remind you and anybody else who the Giants have on the back end of the safety room, of course, they've got their three guys that they like: Tyler Nubin, Javon Holland, and Dane Belton. But then behind them, Raheem Lane, Anthony Johnson Jr., and Makari Page. The one name that I will circle here is Michigan undrafted rookie Makari Page, who had a really solid preseason. I think he was one of the highest graded safeties in the NFL throughout this preseason, according to Pro Football Focus. He's a player that the Giants like. He's a player who played well during the preseason, and he could end up making this roster, but I don't think he's going to prevent the Giants from potentially adding any substantial upgrades at the safety position either, if they feel that there is one available to them. So I would keep an eye on Makari Page, think he can make this roster, but still think that safety is going to be a priority tomorrow afternoon once these cuts occur and they waiver wire, which, to clarify for you, Alex, the Giants are third in waiver priority. Once these cuts happen, I do think with that number 3 priority claim, the Giants will definitely look at safety help.
Yeah, definitely. Safety help makes a lot of sense. I mean, you could also argue, though, maybe with your waiver wire, if you have the third waiver wire claim, maybe you just go like BPA. Like you just take the best player available approach instead of trying to like solve a need. Maybe you just identify like all these guys are getting cut and you had this guy ranked higher in your draft rankings from years ago, or like their performance in recent years or preseason. They're always looking and scouting these players, obviously. Maybe do you subscribe to the idea of like addressing specific needs or just going BPA sometimes with your waiver wire claim at 3?
I think it's very circumstantial and depends on what you're seeing out there. Let's say that there's a star cornerback that gets cut. I mean, is cornerback the biggest need for the Giants? No, but is it a position that they could potentially upgrade in? Yes. So if the best player available ends up being a corner, I think you do put in the claim and you find a way to make it work. So I think there's a balance between it, honestly, Alex. Now, if there's a great quarterback who gets cut, which isn't going to happen. But for example, the Giants don't have room for a quarterback. So no, you're not going BPA in that case. So I think it's really circumstantial. I think it's going to be about filling in any holes in depth for the Giants roster. And right now, to me, those holes come at the backup safety spot, potentially on the defensive interior. I think they could absolutely look for some defensive linemen. There's been a couple of defensive linemen traded this week. Derek Nandi went from the Jets to the Chiefs. The Jets also acquired Harrison Phillips. The Jets getting really active in that market. I wonder if the Giants get active in that market too, because yeah, they have some of these young guys that we like. Obviously, we're hoping that Darius Alexander is able to develop, but in the meantime, they should honestly look to add a little bit more depth on that defensive interior with some experienced veterans who could plug it and play if need be. So that's one of the spots. And like you just said, guard as well, because guys like Aaron Stinney don't necessarily move me. I think Evan Neal doesn't necessarily give me a lot of confidence after this preseason. So I do think the Giants should look to also potentially claim a backup guard on the waiver wire.
Yeah, backup guard would make a lot of sense. I really don't trust guys like Aaron Stinney or Schlotterman or whatever. Evan Neal is a backup. His performance in game is vastly different than when you see him practice sometimes. So I really don't think Evan Neal is even remotely close to being a starting caliber player. He is a very suspect backup. I actually liked what I saw from Josh Azidu this season, like offseason so far, which I didn't expect to say. I definitely think that he has earned the right to at least stick around for a little bit longer. So we'll see how he kind of progresses here. I know he did look decent at left guard, but you have John Runyon there for now. If a guard does pop up that does offer more value than anything we have, I wouldn't be surprised if I did claim somebody there. But linebacker, safety, guard, interior defensive line, those are all positions the Giants could use a bit more support. They probably address 2 of them, if I had to guess. You can't address everything all the time. But like you said, guys do get cut too. Guys like Kyle Duggar might get cut. And I do think that you might be able to scoop those guys up on veteran minimum deals. You know what I mean? Like just really cheap contracts just to fill a role. Sometimes being patient is the best thing to do. I remember years ago, I don't know why his name is escaping me. We ended up signing the veteran safety to it was a much more expensive deal. I think it was a 1-year, $10 million deal. Remember? Why is his name
veteran safety doesn't exactly
you're gonna be like, oh yeah, he was in the Buccaneers
so Logan Ryan,
right? Yes, it skipped my mind. Giants waited, ended up filling a need in Logan Ryan after a couple weeks had passed cut day. So sometimes being patient does come with rewards. But, with the third waiver wire claim, I think that they'll probably pick the best player they can find at the positions they do need some support at. But in addition to that, I don't know. I do think that right now, this is a team that has a lot more talent. The starting talent is substantially better than what we've seen in recent seasons. And I'd say the depth is getting there. I'd say by next year, I think that we're going to have a pretty good foundation of depth. The rookie class so far, I mean, we know he's been out and injured, but he's going to be a really good backup for now, at least. Thomas Fidone looks like he's not even making his team, but he could make an impact in the future. I really like what I've seen from him. You look at Marcus Bowe, 5th rounder. He could start at right tackle right now, and I'd be like, okay, he's going to hold his own. Right now, he is my swing guy. I know they'll probably give it to James Hudson for now, but Marcus Bowe will be a starter long term, I do think. I'm just saying, I don't think they should. Yeah. I just think they are going to go that way.
I get that perspective. I don't think so. I actually think that James Hudson, sure, he's fine. He's a veteran. I think Marcus Bowe demonstrated enough in this preseason. I think the Giants, listen, they make their mistakes. There's no way that they're unable to see what Marcus Bowe put on film. They're going to recognize that he's going to be the swing tackle, in my opinion.
He should be. Yeah, he looked great at right and left tackle. So, he's my swing tackle for sure. I think we'll see how, hopefully we don't have to go that route. Hopefully he doesn't have to play much. Really depends on Andrew Thomas, who's finally kind of getting back into the swing of things here. But, looking at the rest of this rookie class, Alexander, you mentioned he needs a little bit more time to kind of progress there. But everyone looks like they could contribute on day one if need be. Everyone so far, Dart could start. Abdul Carter could start. Scadaboo, if he's healthy, could start. Fidone could contribute. There's a lot of talent here for the first time. Back-to-back drafts where you're getting guys that can make an impact across the board in every single round. That's pretty encouraging, for the most part.
It's super encouraging. I mean, yeah, I love what the Giants did this spring in the NFL draft. I thought their draft class was incredible. And so far on the field, albeit a preseason field, it sure looks that way. I'm happy that you brought up Thomas Fidone, though, because I do want to wrap here. I know that tomorrow, with this topic that I have, I know tomorrow is the cut day, and a lot of fans ask us, what's your final 53-man roster projections? Well, we're going to post something of that sort on Instagram today, so make sure you do go follow at Fireside Giants on Instagram, and you check out our final 53-man roster projections. But just kind of loosely speaking here, I do want to talk about the tight ends room and my prediction for that room. I think the Giants are going to carry 3 or 4 tight ends, but I do not think Daniel Bellinger is going to be one of them. And the reason why is the most expensive tight end on your roster cannot be the least productive. That's my line for the tight end room. I think I've said it before on the channel, but I figured I'd repeat it just because tomorrow is cut day. And I think the best way to really boil this down for everybody, Daniel Bellinger has a $3.6 million cap hit. If you combine Theo Johnson, Greg Dulcich, and Thomas Fidone's cap hits, it doesn't add up to $3.6 million. This one guy, Daniel Bellinger, gets paid more than all 3 of those guys combined. I think you take the $3.4 million in cap savings and you invest it elsewhere, or you just hold on to it and roll it over into 2026. I think a lot of people forget that that's an option. You can roll over that $3 million, and you can definitely do something with it next offseason if you need to. So for me, Bellinger, really liked him as a rookie. Thought he showed a lot of promise back in that 2022 season, but we haven't seen enough from him since then. And unfortunately now, with this tight end room, Dulcich looked really good this summer. Fidone, he has athleticism that you can't teach at the tight end position. I mean, that seam route that he caught from Tommy DeVito, and then he hurdled somebody, made a man miss, and fell to the 1-yard line, that was intense athleticism from a tight end. That enough is worth rostering. And then, like I said, Dulcich and Theo Johnson, we know is going to make this roster, and we know he's going to play a big role this season. So I think those 3 tight ends, if you're only holding 3, those are the guys that you hold. Now, maybe there's not enough blocking upside in that group. Well, then the 4th guy, it wouldn't be Daniel Bellinger for me. It would be Chris Manhertz. Manhertz is the better blocker. So I think if you are going to hold 4 tight ends, my opinion of it is Daniel Bellinger has not proven that he is worth being held among those 4 tight ends at his price point. So that's my final kind of take on this roster projection as we get ready for cut day tomorrow. But guys, again, I'll let you get a chance to speak on that, Alex, but I'll just remind everybody tomorrow after the 4 p.m. cut day and everything is finalized, you will get a full recap and analysis right here on Fireside Giants.
Yeah, I mean, if I had to guess right now, I'd say that Daniel Bellinger probably makes the team, but I don't necessarily think that's the best use of a roster spot. I think, listen, if you right now can tell me that you genuinely believe that Daniel Bellinger is going to stay on the Giants next season, like he's going to get an extension, if you think that he's going to get an extension, then yeah, your opinion is probably valid. Like you think he should have a roster spot. But if you don't think that Bellinger is going to get an extension, why would you not want to give more reps in a bridge year where you're bridging to Jackson Dart? Why would you not want to give more opportunities to guys like Thomas Fidone? You know what I mean? Guys like obviously Theo Johnson's the starter. Chris Manhurst, if you really just like Bellinger for his blocking, Chris Manhurst is the guy that you want on this team. He's the better blocker by far. If you look at guys like, I even like Greg Dulcich. He looked excellent as a receiver and he's a decent blocker. I do think that right now the Giants, like Bellinger's cap hit does not kind of equate to his value. I do think he's being overpaid. I think Fidone can replicate his receiving production, but with ease, like not even remotely close. I think he could actually probably exceed his production in the receiving game. And as a blocker, you have Chris Manhurst. So like, I don't know, like Bellinger, I like him as a player. I think that he kind of got done a little dirty, had some injuries, and obviously his fall off has been more so like coaching and injury related than I think just overall talent. But if you don't think he's going to be, if you don't think he's going to be an extension candidate, I don't see why like you want to give him reps now where he's just going to leave anyway. So I'd rather give opportunities to Fidone, even though he's a 7th round pick and needs a lot of time. The guy's catch radius is one of the biggest I've ever seen. It's an absolute like monster. So I'm pretty optimistic about him in general, but I do think that Theo Johnson's the guy that holds the keys to this unit being good or not. You know what I mean? Manhurst, Fidone, like they're like, they have a specific role or developmental projects. If Theo Johnson does not pan out, this tight end group is going to be not so good this year, most likely.
Yeah, but I am pretty confident that Theo Johnson is going to be an impactful player. I think what we saw, honestly, in person, Alex, when we were at training camp is what really convinced me. Just seeing the Giants dial up those plays for him on the side and then implement them during team drills and watching them be so successful, there's clearly something that they really like about this kid, Theo Johnson, and his ability to make plays with the ball in his hands. I think that's where they really like him. And I do remember he hurdled that Cowboys defender last year, and that was pretty cool. So he can definitely rumble with the ball in his hands. So it's going to be exciting tomorrow. Again, we're going to recap everything, tell you who got cut, tell you who made it. If there's a surprise cut, we'll analyze it. If there is a player who made the 53-man roster that we were gunning for, Bo Collins, for an example, we'll have the recap and analysis on that, or any Gabe Davis signings or otherwise here on Fireside Giants. So make sure to leave a like if you enjoyed this episode. Subscribe to the channel if you're new. Ring the bell so you don't miss an episode, and comment your thoughts down below in the comment section. If you're listening on Apple or Spotify, make sure to leave us a 5-star review, and go ahead and follow us on all of our social media channels at Fireside Giants. Without further ado, we'll catch you on the next one. Have a good one, and let's go New York Giants.